Umpire James, welcome to the Kriegsspiel Umpiring Chat Show.
Thank you for having me, Paul.
You're like royalty. You're King James. You're the one who runs this place.
I'm not quite Father General, or what was Marshall's name? Father General.
Father General. Although really, you're darn close.
I'm the I'm the funny uncle of the IKS. I don't know.
The funny uncle. I like that. We'll go with that. So you have been in the IKS for 3 years, you were saying.
Yeah, I need to go back and look. I joined about 3 years. Yeah, without
Okay.
getting specific.
And you tell the story about how you came to the IKS. You invited Marshall to a game that you were playing on very limited technology, and I don't want to steal your thunder.
Yeah. So I'll go a little bit further back than that.
Sure.
So I grew up at role playing with friends. I did that
Mhm.
from when I was 12, and um, I had turned into a forever DM and was playing with a rule system called Savage Worlds, and they had a rule set for mass battles, which was highly abstracted, but was fun. And so we used that to do battles sometimes in the role
Right.
playing games we did. Um, but I got an itch to be less abstracted, and so I started modifying the rules and getting more specific and trying to simulate battles and conflict. Still very abstracted, but starting to head down the wargaming path. Um, and I was doing that, and then I discovered the Little Wars TV YouTube videos,
Yeah.
and in particular the Marengo video sparked something because I really liked how they did Fog of War in it, and they had multiple tables and not everything was obvious. And so with my friends, we're like, we could do that. And so we came up, we created our own system, which we called Fog of War. At that point, I still hadn't even heard the word Kriegspiel before. But what we basically did is we created Kriegspiel on our own. Because as we were developing these rules, we're like, well, what it would be cooler if, like, you need someone to run the game. And when we started it, we had turns still, like they go, you go, and we're
Right.
like, if we have someone running the game, like we could just do it simultaneously. You just put in the orders, and then whoever's in charge is resolving combat and doing simultaneously.
Right.
And so we basically created Kriegspiel without using Discord or Tabletop Simulator. We used Google Drawings and
Right.
email, and but we went with it and it was a blast. And so we did several games, and then somewhere I think I was just searching for wargaming videos on YouTube, and I think it was Grand Gettysburg was the first one I saw from the IKS, and it was 8 hours long or nine or however long that video was, and I'm like, yeah, I didn't watch all of it. I skimmed through it, but
Right.
still, it was like super impressive because it was these guys playing with a cool looking map, and I could tell there was a lot of people, and it just looked really cool. And so I searched up the International Kriegsspiel Society and found the website, and I figured, hey, I'll email this site. All I knew was Marshall from the video, and I'm like, well, maybe I wasn't thinking to join the IKS. I'm like, maybe Marshall would want to play in one of our games.
Right.
And so I emailed him and I said, hey, do you want to play in one of our games? And he said, sure. And so we played a Revolutionary War game. And so he joined us, and it was fun. And then he um, he invited us to join, or invited me and my friends to join the IKS. But for me at the time, all I knew of the IKS, there was the Grand Gettysburg video, and there was um, a Lynchburg video, and
And that
both
was
of
those 5-hour live streams, right?
yeah, it was so both of them were on a Saturday. They're like 7, 8 hours long, and I'm like, I'd love to play, but I cannot commit. I can't do that, and that's all I thought the IKS was. I didn't know about play by post or anything, and to be honest, there weren't play by post at that point.
Is that right?
Yeah, it was just a couple live games really, and so he invited me, and I'm like, well, I can't play Saturdays for 8 hours, and so I just have to. I can't do it. And then so we played the game, and then I can't remember how, but eventually I'm like, you know what? I'll just join the Discord and just to see. And I think I made my Discord account to join the IKS.
Well,
And
the
then when I
IK got
yeah,
it. Yeah.
so when I got on there, I saw in the recruitment channel, oh, there are these things called play-by-post games, which don't require 8 hours on a Saturday. You can play them, as you have time. And so I basically started joining all of them, as many as I could. So I played. And when I joined, I didn't realize that the IKS was brand new. It felt to me that it seemed like it'd been around for a while because they had a really good website already. They had a YouTube channel. They were running these big games. So I thought they'd been going for years. I didn't realize I was coming in pretty relatively early. But one of the first play-by-post games was run by Crisis. That was Bristow Station, which I missed. But the second one, TAC ran a game on Gettysburg that I joined. And it was the first game that me and Desert Fox faced across from each other, and our great nemesis relationship began.
Right.
Um, so that was a blast. I got hooked, and then soon after that, Carter launched his Chancellorsville game, and then I just joined every game I could
And that
until I
was
couldn't take it anymore. And so I've played in over 300 games since. Um,
300 games. So let's go back to your original fog of war system. And then what was different about what you had conceived on your own versus what you found at the IKS? Because that's very interesting.
yeah.
What was different?
So one interesting thing, um, I'm thinking of the last one we did. We did a Civil War game, which was the Eastern Theater War, where each turn was 1 day.
Hmm.
And the way we did it was if you're kind of like a high level army commander, and it was like 3 versus 3, and you'd have a Google Drawings page which had the whole map,
Right.
and we used text boxes for orders and updates. So each army unit that you controlled, so let's say army commander, you controlled 5 corps, you'd have 5 text boxes, and in those boxes you would type in your orders, and then the umpire would give the update um, each turn. And so rather than like a single Discord channel, you kind of had like a heads up display map with all your orders and updates that would get updated. And so I, as the umpire, when I would resolve a turn, I'd do it on the master map,
Right.
and then I'd get everyone's orders, resolve it on the master map, and then I would copy the master map to the player's map, and then I delete everything they didn't know about. So they had a picture of the whole map, and the
Right.
pieces they had their own pieces that they knew about, and then some of the enemy pieces that they knew about, but the rest they couldn't see. So we had
Yeah.
fog of war from that. Um, and then the order or the updates from each commander would be written in a text like this is what happened this past turn, and
Right.
um, so a lo- uh, it was a lot, and basically what like do, translating that to what we do now rather than like in IKS, each of those sub core commanders that are NPCs in the way we did it, those would be players today that have their own separate commands that you're giving orders to.
Right.
Um, so that's how it worked.
Mhm. But still, the principle was there: is that you were obscuring information for each side, and they were making decisions with imperfect information.
Yeah, imperfect information, heavy fog of war, simultaneous actions and orders, and then
So,
had
what
our
was the
own.
state of play by post when you came in? You said it really wasn't being done that much, and how did it become a thing? Because now it's probably more play by post than live, just based on the volume of the games, right?
Yeah, and maybe I'm not perfect to speak to this
Yeah.
because I wasn't there from the very beginning, but you know the IKS started as it was the Southern California Kriegsspiel Society,
Right.
and they partnered up with a wargaming group in England during COVID because they wanted to play online because they couldn't play in person. So, yeah, I think previously that, and Marshall will have to correct me on this, but I think the Southern California Society, they would get together and play mostly at like Strategicon and other conventions.
Right.
I think they met also at times outside of that, but it's always like live games, get together, meet in
Yeah.
person,
Strategicon
play a
in
game.
LA was the main venue
Yeah, so I don't
before.
think they ever did play by post kind of stuff.
Right.
And so when they formed the IKS, it was the same idea. Okay, we'll do big live games, and they started. They had the Grand Gettysburg, but they also had open Saturdays where every Saturday they'll have a game. Um, but I think so. I don't know even who started the play-by-post idea. Maybe it's Alex or maybe it's Tack. But just once you've got Discord and that ability, it's not hard to run a game that way.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's great, of course, for people who can't commit to a live game. You can instead commit 10 to 15 minutes every couple days
Well, I think
for
the point you make about it being a relatively new society. I mean, it's at this point 3 years old, 4 years old. Of course, they were doing Creeksspiel before that, but as we exist now, this is a new thing. So innovations to the format are it's should be expected. Coming up with new ways of doing it, new technologies, new approaches, and you see a lot of that. It's not like we're hidebound and trying to just replicate something that this society has been doing for 50 years. It's actually a relatively new idea to take Kriegspiel and expand it.
right.
What now? Now you're legendary for your volume. You've now done 160 games. How many? What are you at now?
154.
154
Oh,
games. You're
this is
100 games more than KB, who I just talked to.
Gideon wanting to say hi.
He's 54. Hey there, hi buddy. How are you? So we got an additional guest um, who's joined us. Hey
I'm
there, how
good.
are you?
Good.
Good. Good to see you. The Kriegspieler in the making, a
Yeah.
Kriegspieler in training. I love it. And so you have your Thursday nights. You are in a lot of play by post and you play a lot, which I think is amazing. Um, what techniques do you use to be able to create so much volume other than just working hard at it or doing having more time? What kind of things do you do to allow you to work at such scale?
Yeah. Um, so I mean, a big part of it is time and commitment. I
Yeah,
basically, my wife goes to sleep at 10:30, and then from that until midnight one, it's Kriegspiel time for the most part, and so that's when I do resolutions and whatever I'm working on at the time. Besides that, I don't. I, some games I run myself now, but there's a lot I don't do on my own.
right.
And so, you've had a lot of guests on here that know insane amounts of history and military knowledge. I I know a lot more than the average person, but not as not as much as them. I would say my strengths are more organizational and facilitational, and so um, I'm able to organize a group of umpires and run games that way. So rather than having to process a turn every 3 days, I can come up with a game idea, organize it, and if I get a team of 5 umpires, I only have to process a turn every 15 days, and they're running the rest. And so
Right.
by spreading the work and involving more umpires, I'm able to do a lot more. And so in that way, I'm able to run 2 to 5 play-by-post games at a time, and then
What is it
live
that you
games.
enjoy the most about having partial kind of inputs and you're not running it all yourself, as you just said? What is it that you like about having like 5 games at a time that you're overseeing?
Well, there's part of it I have, and every umpire I think has this problem is there's a million ideas that you want to do,
Right.
and there's just not enough games to do them all.
Right.
Fortunately, I'm able to get pretty close to keeping up with all the ideas I have. Sometimes it's a map that I like, sometimes it's a historical battle I want to do, sometimes it's a kind of scenario, but um, having so many ideas, I'm able to kind of work through them all with all the games that I have.
Okay.
Sorry, there's two. I had two answers added. What was the original question?
Well, just the techniques that you use to keep that level of volume up. So, map making with GIMP using certain techniques would be an example of a thing you can make a lot of maps quickly, as an example, right?
Yeah,
Okay. But really, it's about you enroll and support other umpires and bringing these ideas to life is the way you do it. Because some umpires, and I probably more on this end of the scale, will have one idea and then run one game over a course of 6 months. It's very complicated. It's very deeply researched, and it's great. And then they do another one, later. And so they do 2 games a year, and that's their enjoyment of the hobby, right?
Yeah, and
and
that's
that's
fine.
totally fine. Yeah,
I mean, there's certainly you should only do what you can handle, and you
right,
don't want to burn yourself out. So you got to know your limits pretty well and make sure you don't go over that. Because the saddest thing to see is, you know, umpires come in and they've got this big idea and want to run this big game, and it's just too much for them.
right,
And some people recover from that. They quit the game, but they come back later. But we've seen several now that they got this huge game. They say, "Oh, we're gonna do it, guys. I got it," and all of us are like, all right, I hope you do. And then all of a sudden they're just gone and you don't hear from them
yeah,
ever again. And I don't know if they're like if they quit and leave in shame, which is understandable. But it's sad because if they had done less, then they may have been more successful and not just disappeared.
right. And it's always unfortunate when someone has clearly put an enormous amount of work into researching an order of battle, and then it just, for reasons of real life or burnout or whatever, then they don't bring it to fruition. Um, they don't bring it to completion. So, yeah, how do you
I,
keep from burning out?
I remember the other thing I wanted to say, and then I'll answer that
Yeah,
question.
yeah,
So that the question was how do I do so much volume? So one was getting umpires. The other part was for whatever reason, I'm pretty efficient in my resolution, so I'm really fast
right,
at. And part of that's my rule systems because they're always simple and quick. So I'm not bogged down when I resolve combat or things. And then you know, some umpires are amazing at the level of detail and what they write in the updates. I'm more austere with my words, so
yeah,
I'm more about volume of games than volume of dispatch updates. So I don't write as much usually. I'm pretty sparse, which lets me do so much. Um,
right.
yeah, that was the answer. And then what was the question you just asked?
Well, burnout. I mean,
Oh yeah, how to avoid burnout.
I want to dive into burnout because I think it's an important topic because you can do 5 games and burn out accidentally, or 154 games and not burn out. I think this is something we should all be talking about to make sure that we keep our personal momentum going, because it's really the lifetime of an umpire that matters. If you do 40 games over the life of your umpiring, that's better than doing 5 really fast and going away.
Yeah.
We want to keep you in the game. So how do you keep from burning out?
Um, I pace myself. If I ever feel like it's too much, I will slow down a game.
Yeah,
Most games I try to do resolutions every 2 to 3 days, and if I'm just feeling like a little like I can feel myself getting burnt out, then maybe I'll do a 4 day resolution where I actually have a night where I'm not doing Kriegspiel and do something else instead.
yeah.
Um, yeah, you just monitor that, take the time when you need it, take a break. Be aware what you can handle. Um, you know,
Mhm.
for me, I can do a lot, so I do a lot, but yeah, you just got to monitor that and slow it down if you have to. Players will understand. They'd much rather have a slow game that
Yeah.
finishes than a fast game that just burns out in the middle and goes nowhere.
I've never had a player complain when you just say, "Hey, I'm going to resolve this 3 hours late tonight," or "Hey, we're going to push this to tomorrow."
Yeah,
When just gives you a thumbs up, says, "Yeah, no
and
problem."
and
Yeah.
es-
Yeah.
especially if you communicate, like if you're up front and clear with the people, with your players, you say, hey, I'm delaying resolution 2 days because I need a break. And no one's going to complain about that. Everyone
Right.
understands. But it's when you don't communicate, deadline comes and goes, and there's no resolution, and the umpires ghosted you, and they won't respond to, hey, what's going on? That's when it's bad. So it's better just to say, hey, I'm overwhelmed. I'm going to take a break, and then come back to it. That's better that way.
So if we go through the whole cycle of, because I think this is related to burnout, in terms of not burning out, but if you go through the whole cycle of researching, creating order of battle, setting up, recruiting players, playing, resolving, and then AAR, which of that is the real part that gives you a lot of like enjoyment? Which part of that whole umpiring cycle?
Oh, um, I enjoy um, the scenario creation part where I'm
Hmm.
trying to, whatever the battle or scenario is, I'm trying to simulate the same constraints and decisions within that were faced historically. Um,
Right.
I like the challenge of creating a scenario that does that in the most simple way better as possible. And then I like, of course, within the game resolution itself, I just love the chaos of Kriegsspiel, where the fog of war and all of that creates is just fun to watch as an umpire.
Yeah, yeah. Those little moments that you see everything either come together or not that the player can't really see, but you see it all come together. I agree. Those are fun. So your scenario creation, you are a legend for the periods that you cover. You do Romans. You'll do. I mean, you're doing a Diplo game now that's space. Um, obviously you've done the Napoleonic. You do an absolute metric ton of Civil War. I mean, there's really no period that you haven't had some little dalliance in. How do you do that? How do you keep that such a broad interest going?
Um, yeah, I don't know. I My interests just vary widely. I don't, you and for example, you and Sean Lambert's focus down on Franco-Prussian times, and for me,
Right.
I like dabbling everywhere. So I'm a jack of all trades, master of none when it comes to history, history and time periods. I just
Right.
go with what fancies me and what seems fun. I like learning about all periods of history and wargaming them all. I mean, I have favorites and ones I dislike, but um, I don't know. They're just all interesting to me, so I like
Yeah.
figuring it out.
Now you just last night did a Muse or Gone live game, a World War I battle,
Hmm.
and I think that's kind of amazing. Talk about that game a little bit as an example of the way, because it's not like James is a World War I aficionado and he's done 50 games in World War I. It's like there you
Yeah.
go. How do you approach something as complicated and as difficult a game as World War I in the Meuse-Argonne Forest?
So it started. A lot of my live games ideas start with a YouTube video I saw. So I saw a video
All
about
right.
the Battle of Belleau Wood,
Right.
and World War One is not my favorite time period, and it's not one I've done before. And so part of it was the challenge of, can I do a World War scenario that is fun to play, both as for a player and an umpire? Um, and I thought Bellawood was a good candidate for its scale. And so I took my World War II operational rule set, which I've been working on, and then tweaked it to fit World War One as best I could based on
Right.
what I understood. And you know, I don't know if you saw, but I was asking around for people's rule sets for World War One on the Discord, and using those as guides of what kind of modifiers and things to do. And so, um, yeah, basically, I took my World War II set, which was as simple to start with, and then just
Right.
added a couple of modifiers and tweaks. And I was actually pretty happy with how it turned out. I think
Okay.
I felt like the results were reasonable. Now that's hard to do when you're not a World War One expert, but I watched 4 or 5 YouTube videos leading into it to kind of go over how that battle went historically, like
Hmm.
how likely were attacks to happen in certain cases, how long did the battle take itself, what were the considerations and the factors of it, and then incorporating that into it, and then um, making it work. Now,
Hmm.
because it wasn't as defined and new, it took a little bit more of the umpire team talking through resolution, like, okay, this just happened, this is happening, this was the role. Does that make sense? And we had to tweak a little bit more than I think we normally do as we talked through it. But that's actually kind of fun to, as an umpire team, talk through the resolution and say what makes sense to happen here, and then going through that.
This was part of your live Thursday sessions.
Yeah.
How many umpires? How many players? What does one of your live Thursday sessions look like?
So on average, you usually have 3 to 5 umpires, and
Okay.
then usually the umpire to player ratio is really good. So with, I'd say, average 4, well, with myself, probably 5 umpires, 4 or 5. And then we usually have 10 to 15 players. So it's usually 2 to 1 or 3 to 1 player umpire ratio. And with that, I have everything set up beforehand. All the briefings done. The players have planned their plans. All the channels are set up. So when we show up at 9, we're ready to go. There's just a little bit of last minute stuff, but we basically start 9:05, and then a game's done in 2.5 hours. Because
Yeah.
of that umpire to player ratio and my fast combat rolls, we usually do like 10-minute resolution cycles. So in 2.5 hours, we get through 15, 16 turns, and then we reached a conclusion and can call it and talk about it.
So a Thursday night you play the Bellawood game, and you had an idea from a couple of YouTube videos. How long from the first YouTube video to, because you do these every week, so this is not like you worked on this for 2 months and you had a live game. I mean, you had one last week and the week before, et cetera. There's a whole list of them on your server. From the time you saw the first YouTube video to putting that in production, how long was that?
Probably about 4 or 5 months. That's
Okay.
my game backlog right now. I don't even know how many. I probably got about 4 months worth of games. I haven't one every week, just on
Yeah.
the list that I plan to get through. So I know far ahead in advance what games are coming, and so
Okay.
usually I'm actually getting worse later. I'm my what's the right word for it? I'm not as ahead as I used to be. I used to be like 3 or 4 games ahead and having the map and the pieces all done. I'm
Right.
not as ahead now, but basically 2 to 3 weeks prior, I'll make sure I have a map for it, and pieces built, a module. I'll write the briefing. I'll share with the players, and then any other things I have to think about. So that usually by the time it I just had my last live game, almost everything's ready for the next one, so the players have a whole week to do their planning and discussions.
Right. Okay. So you see a YouTube video that intrigues you, and you say, okay, you go to the end of your list, which is like 4 months away. You say, okay, well, I'll slot it in there, and then you'll slowly build up the different pieces of information, the orders of battle, and all that for the. And so when do you do like a head down final, really get it going? Is that
I mean, the week of,
the week of? But
yeah,
you've got all the materials kind of collected, and the week of you polish it up.
yeah. So for example, next week I'm doing the Cuban invasion, the Bay of Pigs, although I
Right.
probably won't be at the Bay of Pigs. Um,
Yeah.
and so that one, I saw there's a YouTube video on it. It was like a 50-minute, I think it's Montemayor or Operations Room. I can't remember who did it. But like a 50-minute video of the whole thing, which I'm like, you know what? I've heard of it, but I don't know any details about the Bay Pig, so I'm gonna watch the video. And I thought it was the issues that they had were very fascinating on the rebel U.S. CIA side, and I'm like,
Right.
you know what? That would be kind of fun to play out and see if players can do any better given slightly different circumstances. And so I watched the video twice, and the second time I watched it, I took a lot of notes of the order of battle they had, who
Hmm.
was in charge, what was issues that they had, and like radio communication issues, other issues. So I took notes on that, and that was like 2 months or 3 months ago, and then I kind of forgot it because I had to work on other stuff. And then I found a map. The key thing is finding a good map. So I found a really good map. Um, I think the University of Texas had a good Cuba map that's modern enough or old enough, somewhere in between. It was like a World War II era map,
Right.
that had the whole island and enough detail. And so I kept that link, and then I basically didn't work on it again. Like I said, I'm behind, but I didn't work on it again until the game ended last night, the World War One game, and then um, I had the map already. I finalized the order of battle, and actually, this one's interesting because it's the first time I used ChatGPT to help me because it's a lot more complicated, and I was struggling to find reference materials that I was looking for. So I asked
Right.
ChatGPT, and it may be wrong, but you don't have to be 100% historically accurate. I'm not doing this for a museum or a historical
Yeah.
society. Like this is just a game. So I asked ChatGPT, please give me the order of battle for the entire Cuban army, you know, preceding the Bay of Pigs invasion, and it gave a pretty good list. And then I asked for who was involved on the rebel side and what were the battalion, things like that. And so it helped me
Yeah.
finalize the all the info I needed, and then I could share that with the players so they could do their planning.
Well, at a very minimum, it gets you started.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, it's a good
And
starting
then
point.
it'll give you the sources, and so you could, if you really want to just go double check, you can pop into the sources.
Yep.
Um, I think there's a baby in bathwater problem with AI, and that everybody wants to swear off it and say it's and it has a lot of drawbacks. But I find finding materials it's amazing at, particularly if you're looking at some of the older digitized books, for example,
Oh
on
yeah.
1860s, 1870s. So,
It,
yeah.
it's a
Okay.
helpful tool. I just concluded a War of the Rings game,
Hmm.
and in the finale, um, long story short, Denethor had found the One Ring, uh,
Right.
and took it from Frodo, kept it for himself, and then was wearing it as he went to attack Osgiliath with Gondor and Rohan. And at the very end, a Nazgul sensing the ring flew down and challenged him, and the ring betrayed him, and Denethor died. And the Nazgul got the ring, but um, I'm like, I'm gonna have a hard time. I want to make an epic description of what just happened, but I'm not
This is
Tolkien.
in your game, and
This is in
I'll
the game, yeah.
version.
So I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm not Tolkien. So I asked ChatGPT, write me a 2 paragraph description of this happening in the form of Lord of the Rings, and it did. It wasn't perfect, but I took that as a template, and then I changed it myself, and it was a lot better than what I would have come up with on my own.
Yeah. Right. Right. I think that's interesting. I think yeah, that's great. So your reports are more Spartan in nature. Um, talk about talk about how you train umpires in that. I know there's. I think it's a frothy and difficult topic because there are some umpires who are held up as examples because they write incredibly detailed poetic reports, and then there are other umpires who don't write enough, right? And so finding
Hmm.
that right balance is, of course, a style thing. But talk about how you try to advise newer umpires on writing reports because some people don't like to write.
Yeah, I there are people who do awesome. ARP is one, Ruse is
Yeah.
another. Auto come to mind. They all write really good reports, and it's amazing. And that comes with a cost, though, because um, if you spend that much time on each report on each player, you're limiting how many players or games you can do, which is fine. Like you can have small games and small numbers of players. I'm kind of the opposite idea of small reports and lots of games and lots of players as much as possible. In
Right.
terms of training umpires, I don't really focus too much on the report writing. Most people figure it out um, as they go, and there's I guess there is a wrong way to do it. You can be too sparse, but for the most part, people give what they can, and I think
Yeah.
at least in my training, they kind of use what I give or others give as a guide, and then go off that. And what I find is most people are actually better than I am at being more descriptive, and part of it is I'm I've I'm probably burnout or disillusioned. Disillusion's not the right word. I'm shaded or jaded in this regard that I've done so many. I don't even want to think about the number. If you think about how many reports I've given, if I've done 154 games,
Yeah.
of which is like 70s play by post, 50 to 70s play by post, I've probably given tens of thousands of updates in my lifetime. So after so many updates, at some point I'm like, you march to this place, and that's all I write.
20
Like,
turns by 15 players by 75 games. There's James typing away.
yeah. So I'm probably a little burnt out in that regard, where I don't add as much flavor as someone who's brand new, who's like, yeah, I'm gonna write this amazing novel. Um, so yeah, most umpires, they don't need training in that regard, I guess is what I'm saying. It's more about the
Yeah.
rules.
Yeah.
It's the organization around it. It's what's the right amount of screenshot, and then the right way to think about how to resolve a turn when you have so many different orders and from so many different directions, and doing that in a reasonable way.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think the players want to know what happened, and they want intelligence that will help them discern what to happen in the future. Not sure they want to hear period language that sounds like Moby Dick, or Melville or
Yeah,
Faulkner or whatever. But
it
that's a personal style
it
thing. So
it's fun when you do. I mean, like ARP, for example, when he does an update, it's if it were a book, it'd be 4 or 5 pages long, and he includes pictures with it. He kind of describes the sceneries he passed by.
Yeah, I
He
think that's
he usually
amazing.
have like an NPC commoner show up in the middle of it. Like he writes a small story about it, and it's amazing.
Yeah.
Um, and it's good. But the bare bones of it is the players need to understand, what happened and why. And if you don't, you just need to give a good enough description that they feel they may not like that what happened, but if they can understand why it happened, that's
Right.
all they need to know. So
That's a great point. What the why of it is can be captured in a very concise way, and that works just as good as a
yeah,
more period report that doesn't give that. That's a great point. What is your philosophy of screenshots? I think I know the answer, but let's share it with the umpire community at large.
well, yeah, I think you're asking everyone this one.
Yeah.
I've actually been thinking about my answer to that. So it varies.
Hmm.
Um, I think I tend towards larger screenshots because if you can give more info in the screenshot, it's less you have to write in the report. If you give
Hmm.
a small one, then you're creating more work for yourself
Yeah.
describing what's going on beyond what they can see because you got to
Yeah.
simulate all the reports that are coming in. If it's just a big screenshot, that's good. Um, but you don't want to give everything because you give everything, you destroy Fog of War and it's no fun. And so I think as a very high rule of thumb, I give 75% of the info and leave 25% unknown.
Okay, that's a great way to think about it. So
So
75%. So your screenshot to be a little larger, they would include a little bit more, and 25% of it's the mystery for the immediate area.
yeah, so they don't know, they might not see. I guess depends how compact their formation is and where they
Sure.
are and all that. But I think umpires tend to give too little information and such that the players can't make meaningful decisions.
Yeah.
And that's no fun. A player wants to make a good decision. They want to be the Napoleon in their own right. And if you can't foresee enemy movements or predict things that are going to happen, if you can't make smart decisions, that there's never that opportunity, and that's not what people are here for. So you got to actually give a fair amount of information, not all, because the fog of war is what makes it fun, but enough that players can make those decisions and be the Napoleon, make that genius move that others might not have foreseen, but they saw and made that attack at the right time, and it was the right move.
But you've said that so well. I think it, it just reflected back. So umpires of whatever um, level of experience can hear it clearly. The purpose of the screenshot is to give players enough information they can make a meaningful decision. It's not their line of sight. It's not like a strict adherence to some sort of, well, you can only see the church tower from this point. It's what is it that you give them that allows them to get enough information to make a decision. And sometimes it means they could see the church tower, but you don't show them the church tower. That's too much.
Yeah.
That's in the You move that to the 25% because you know that that would unlock it for them and make their decision obvious. Okay, that's great. I like that. I think that that's a much better way to frame it, and we can share that with umpires rather than just saying make them bigger, right? Or make them smaller or whatever. It's like, no, you are as an umpire creating a visual of something that helps them make a decision. Great. Okay. Talk about some of your other projects because you do way more than just your Thursday evenings and throw a couple play-by-posts on anything. We've got the Newcomer Games, we've got the Kriegsspiel Cup. You're an admin, but the admin stuff's probably not for this podcast. But talk about the Kriegspiel Cup and what the idea was there. Because that's umpiring in a different form. It's actually creating a competition of sorts.
Yeah, so the Kriegsspiel Cup started, I guess, over a year ago now, and it really started when Miles randomly showed up in the Grand Waterloo game, and
Right.
I think he was actually one of my subordinates, and
Yeah. Miles
uh,
from Little Wars
from
TV,
Little Wars TV, and
who's a
and he was
great he's a
he,
great character.
he's awesome, he's amazing, but
I was a fan of his before I even joined IKS because I'd watched their videos,
yeah,
and
so
he felt like a guy I'd love to
he
hang out
showed
with.
up in Waterloo. I don't even know how he got the invite, but he's in Waterloo and he's one of my subordinates. And I'm like, is that the Miles? Like, I'm a big Little Wars
It's
TV
the
fan, and so I'm
Miles.
like, is it the Miles like reporting to me? And so I even co-located with him, and like, I'm talking to Miles, and So anyway, he joined, he played, he loved it, and I don't even know. We'll have to ask him how he how he even got the invite. But so he came, and then as an admin group, we're like, we've got Miles playing games with us. Like we need to get all of Little Wars playing games with us.
Yeah, yeah,
And so the idea was like, well, let's what can we offer that's unique, and it's the chance for groups that are geologic or not geologic geographically far apart to play games online, because that's our unique offering is, we combine
sure.
anywhere around the world you can play games with us at the
Hmm.
IKS. And so the first one last year was just um, it wasn't Kriegsspiel Cup at the time. We're like, we'll just do a face-off of Mark's Game Room versus Little Wars TV. We'll invite them, we'll host a game for them, let them face off and prove who's better. And we ran the Civil War operational game, which was a blast. And then after that, Miles was like, well, let's do it again and make it bigger, and let's like make a tournament out of it. And so this year we're what's called, the second annual Kriegsspiel Cup, and we've got four teams competing to, see who can beat the champions, which is Little Wars TV from last year. And so we got more wargaming groups. We got the Lawton Strike Force from London and Mark's Game Group
That's great.
again, and then IKS formed a team to play, and then
Who's
there
on
was
the
another.
IKS team? Just for those of us in the society, so we know who our representatives are on the battlefield.
Yeah, so Marshall and Achilles,
Uh-huh.
Zeke, Jen, TJ9, and then McPanzer and Lake Sarina are on the IKS team.
There you go. All
And
right.
so they
So
they won the first two games, and now they're going to Pennsylvania in July, and they're going to face off against Little Wars TV in person, which is going to be a blast. And I'm
are
very
these
excited.
operational games? What did you keep in that style in terms of the
So
scenario?
I wanted to vary it. So the first game was an Ancients battle. It was the Battle of Raphia,
Goodness.
and we did it. It was a style that I've been developing or exploring, which is three-dimensional first-person point of view. And so it's a 3D map
Sure.
with 3D pieces, and
Yeah.
which is really well suited for Ancients battles. And so when the umpire visits you, they share their screen and they give you a 360 view of the
Yeah.
battlefield from the point of view of the commander, um, which is really cool and makes things really hard and makes you appreciate how stinking huge these ancient armies are, and like you just extend it
Yeah.
for miles, and like you're just not seeing the end of the army. But anyway,
Right.
so Battle of Raphia was the first one, and then we did Battle of Hoover's Gap, American Civil War for the second one. The last
Okay.
one's going to be Napoleonic, a smaller Napoleonic battle, because this one's interesting for me. It's the first time I'm limited by the number of miniatures that they have, because we're going to use real minis at the Little Wars
Okay.
TV clubhouse. And so I had to coordinate with them. Okay, how many minis of these types of units do you have, and design a scenario based on that limitation. So,
So you're mixing minis with Creekspiel. How does that work in terms of does the tabletop, is that a traditional minis where you can see everything?
well, what do you mean?
Well, you're going to play a Creekspiel with miniatures.
Oh, yeah. So I'm doing what I've done before at in live games at conventions, which is staff command, where they have a table in front of them with a map, a 3D map in their case, with actual tree figurines and whatnot.
Yep.
Um, and they will, and when I've done it before, I had a flat map in little blocks, and the staff essentially was responsible for controlling their map. So I would give them updates at representing a courier from their NPC commanders, and then they
Huh?
would manipulate their map based on those inputs. And then they would write order or will write orders on note cards, and those will come back as dispatches. So there'll be two player maps with each with their identical sets of minis that they'll be managing, and then a master map in the middle, which I'll manage as the umpire, and we'll make it work
And
that
so
way.
it's really a staff Kriegspiel where you're pointing out on the map where a regiment would go, and then the players would move that regiment to that spot, and they're moving miniatures in this
Yeah,
case.
yeah,
Cool.
because it's in person and you're limited by the number of miniatures. You can't have each person with their own individual map and do it that
Yeah.
way.
Right.
So
That's not practical. Okay. Neat. And then the newcomer games. There's a phenomenon, right? You've created a new hybrid newcomer game. We have new umpires and new players. Um, uh, Talk about that and how many experienced umpires are helping. Just talk about that effort a little bit.
Yeah, so that started over a year ago, and it was really just a need. I noticed that there's always a problem of people not being able to get into games as much as they'd like, of course. But we would have people join the IKS and look for games, and then there weren't any. And especially because games, and rightfully so, umpires wanted players that they knew were reliable and would give a good game. And so, people like myself, for example, I have much better odds getting into a game than a new unknown person. But that makes it harder for that unknown person to prove themselves.
Right.
And so the idea was we're going to make a game that anyone can get into. They can play once, and at least they'll have that Kriegspiel experience that hopefully hook them and get them addicted for life and stay with the community and keep
Yep.
playing. So my first game wasn't well designed. Well, it was an okay game, but the way I envisioned it just wasn't organizationally feasible. So it ended in like a month or two, because my idea was I'd have a normal red versus blue game,
Mm-hmm.
but every couple turns, everyone would graduate. So you'd start at the divisional level command, and then after a few turns, you'd become a corps commander, and then after a few turns, you'd become an army commander, and then after a few turns, you'd become an umpire or whatever. Um, but that was very unwieldy and didn't work out, and so I scrapped that. And then we did what one of the newcomer games is now, which is a giant. It's a staff command on a kind of free for all on an island, and so um, it was set on Malta. Now it's switching to Majorca. But basically, as players arrived, they would form a team of like 8 to 10 people, and then as soon as that team was formed, they would pick their order of battle, and then they'd arrive on the island, and there'd already be teams who'd been there and were fighting already or doing stuff,
Right.
and so they'd come into it. They'd have 2 days of game time to seize these cities and capture points, and then get off the island and hopefully be safe. And so it had a limited time frame so that they you couldn't just stick around forever, and so they'd be able to play for a little bit, and then they'd be done, and that worked out really well.
Good.
Um, there's 15 umpires helping with that, so it, it's a huge game. So a resolution takes 2 to 3 hours, but like I only have to do resolutions every once a month, so it's reasonable.
Yeah.
Um, and then with the recent giant influx we had after the Super Bunny Hop video, that wasn't enough. Like we've got 11 or 12 teams on there. So there's 100 players playing at any point in time, but it wasn't enough. So I started a new newcomers red versus blue one,
The new
and that
newcomers.
and
Yeah.
this was inspired in part by your Moltka problems, because the thought was uh, fast resolution, fast cycling, and so I created a scenario where it's only 5 turns,
Right.
and so you form a team. It's still staff command, but form a team. It's 5 on 5, and you've got 5 turns to achieve the objective or not, and then the game's over. And so we get through games in 10 to 15 days,
Yep.
and then it can move on. And so it's a quick way to resolve. But the nice thing about it is I'm using that same server as an umpire training center. So we have 20 to 25 umpires who they're taking turns resolving games for veteran players. Um,
Yep.
but it's the problem with the other newcomer game, the big Malta game, was each turn resolution was huge. So it's very
Right.
daunting for new umpires. It's a lot. And so the new one is a lot more bite size. It's small, it's easy, and it's a good place to start for new umpires in terms of getting a feel for combat resolution and how all of that
Yeah,
works.
it
And
seems like
so,
because you eliminate having to find units, you eliminate having to identify which channel is associated with which command. You just eliminated that all down to, okay, here's two bite-sized units that are fighting. You still have to go through the because I'm in one of the games. The player, you have to go through the discipline of saying, okay, the two conflicting orders. Where does it overlap? What judgment call do I make here? How do I do the screenshot? So I think it feels like it's the right thing, and I see the umpires rotating through, which is great.
mhm.
Yeah. What so the Malta style, which has become Mallorca, which is great because if you don't have success in the battlefield, you can perhaps go and enjoy some light electronic dance music. Um, but and then now you've got this new bite-sized format. Where does the whole Newcomer game initiative end up? Do you think, in terms of a sustainable long-term effort?
So I think the Malta Mallorca is pretty sustainable. Because even for me, it's pretty minimal input or effort on my part to keep it running. And
Yeah,
there's a lot of good umpires that help me with it. And so it's it's sustainable in that it doesn't burn too many people out from umpiring perspective. There's a lot of players that come through it and we say, "Hey, if you want to umpire, let us know," and they raise their hand and then they join and help. And so we're always adding as well. And so I mean, for me, there's no end to that one. I think it can
yeah,
keep
okay.
going
So
for a
that's a
long
thing that
time.
could be the gyro that you just keep spinning on it, and it continues to serve the community. And then there'll be surges of interest based on some YouTuber will drop a video or whatever. So
Yeah. Yeah, we're getting ready. We're getting past this current surge and
yeah,
I'm
right.
I'm
Right.
mentally preparing for the next one. And
Oh,
uh,
inevitably it'll come. So, what advice would you give a new umpire? You're not only training new umpires, and so you're right in the center of it, but you're probably you are our most prolific umpire. What advice would you give a new umpire?
um well, to start with, it's the advice that we are always careful to give anyone who's talking about a new game is start small and simple.
Yeah.
Um because you got it, like as we talk about burnout, you got to know your limits and you won't know it until you actually get into it. And so in my first Kriegsspiel games, I did a 2v2 with
Hmm.
a map and pieces I didn't make. I just borrowed a module and I ran a game and kind of figured out what it was like. And then I ran a 3v3, and then by then I had a good feel for what I could do. And so then I started, making my own maps and pieces and scenarios, and then got bigger with 16 players, then 25, then 50, and then been going ever since. But
Yeah, yeah,
you got to start small so you know what your limits are and what you can handle, and then once you know that, you can go from there. And then someone gave the advice: don't whatever idea. Everyone comes with an idea when they want to umpire, like some battle they want to run or a scenario or something. And someone gave the advice: don't run that first,
right.
because you got to lead up to it. And if you run it first, you'll make too many mistakes and be really sad about how it didn't go how you thought it would. Because there's things that you just haven't thought about, um, that that go into making of the game and making it work well, that you kind of got to work out in different games.
Yep.
So that's helpful. And then I guess other advice for umpiring. Um, I guess talking about burnout, find whatever makes it fun for you. Find that, figure it out, and focus on it. And if you start getting away from it, go back to it. If you're having a hard time sticking with a game, sometimes it's recruiting a good group of spectators to add commentary to know that there's a peanut gallery. Sometimes it's throwing in some kind of strange Easter egg to the players that they got to work with that adds intrigue.
Yeah.
You just got to figure out what works for you and keeps it interesting.
Right. I think that's sage advice. Very sound advice because there's a thing for all the things you have to do when you umpire, the tasks you have to accomplish. There's one or two things that give you a thrill, us thrill as an umpire, right? And there's a very long list of potential things. And if you lose track of that of those one or two things, you'll find yourself grinding through games and not really understanding why you started doing it in the first place, right? But if
Yeah,
you
you can
keep
you can
track of that
forget
one
it.
thing, then because this is the payoff. This is what I love to do. Terrific, man. I consider you a co-host for this show, and I certainly, subject to your busy schedule, want to have you on for maybe we'll do some panels, we'll do some things because you and I are cooperating on a project to make being an active umpire something that's cool, that's recognized, that's seen, I think we're now at the 80 active umpire level. I know it's bigger than that with the good work you're doing on the newcomer server. And I look forward when we have 100 Creeksspiel umpires that are actively creating content. I don't think that's far away. Um, and just we could make the culture and the community of umpires more cohesive and more fun to be a part of. So you're a key player in that, and it's kind of a project we're working on together.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate the videos that you're doing because it is helping to highlight the good umpires that are out there and really illustrate, what they who they are and what they do, and appreciate you taking the time to do that.
Hey, amazing talents. It's really inspirational to talk to him. James, the Father General, King James, we'll call you. Thanks so much for coming on. It was great. We'll have you back on, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right, thanks, Paul.